Good morning. This is Jason Dean. Good morning, YouTubers. Jason Dean at Film Fanatic. Hope everyone's doing good. This is another new video for some, my next pile of exploitation movies that I just, you know, been devouring lately. It's been a lot of fun. I actually went up to Bull Moose yesterday, um, and I've been going. I try to usually go up to buy some new movies, at least once a month or so. I'm trying to accumulate, a pretty decent collection. I think I have a pretty decent collection anyway, but since I've been kind of going down this whole like rabbit hole of all things, in the world of exploitation, I've been just kind of obsessed with it, and it's just been uh, so much fun, so much, um, so many new things that I've been coming across, so many new films and new directors. And it's interesting too because it's been kind of a thing of where I've been almost like connecting the dots to, to certain, like I've been discovering new directors, um, and they've had they had their heyday, say like in the '70s and '80s, where they released tons and tons of movies, and I know at some point I probably saw some of their films when I was a kid, back when I talk about the times of VHS, and so like when I well, the case in point, today's show, this is all about this incredible movie here, Jess Franco's Angel of Death. Amazing film. I had never seen this movie before. So one guy that I've talked a lot about, who is probably, well, he's definitely my favorite YouTube guy, Moods. He's a serious collector, and he watches everything. But he literally will he'll do these big giant like Blu-ray or DVD hauls where he'll drop some serious cash, and he'll get these like bi-monthly packages in the mail, and he'll do these shows where he talks about all these films and stuff. And so that's kind of how I got into him as a filmmaker, was through his show, Jess Franco. And so like when I started to kind of look into like other films that Jess Franco had done, and I would look through the list, and I realized, wow, this guy was so prolific. I mean, he put out at one point almost a movie a year. He passed away quite a few years ago, but I was going through like his whole like collection of films, and it was really interesting because I came across a handful of movies that I remember seeing as a kid, and but I had no idea. Like, again, this was like years and years ago when I was like, you know, um, probably 11 through 15 or something like that, when a lot of these things were coming out, or they were on VHS. So I would figure I probably had seen some of his films. He did a 1970 version of Dracula, starring Christopher Lee, which I had seen. There was a handful of a few other movies of his that I had seen. So Devil Hunter, Vampire Lesbos, which was a real popular one that came out in '71. I remember seeing that one. That was around the time too. I've talked a lot about it, and I'll definitely do a show on this group of films. But that was during the time when I was really watching a lot of the Hammer films, the old British movies from like the '60s, '70s, and even '80s. Mostly in the '60s and '70s, where they were predominantly, all these amazing vampire films that came out starring Christopher Lee, the iconic, actor playing Dracula. And all of those films, the classic Hammer films, I, was raised on, and I just, loved that stuff so much. And I remember that was kind of my introduction to, in a lot of ways, to like kind of the low budget or like the gothic horror kind of genre. But I remember seeing, and also during that time, that was a heyday for all of these great, European exploitation movies that came out. Tons and tons of all these vampire movies and knockoffs, and Vampire Lesbos was definitely one of them. And I was a huge Christopher Lee fan, still am, and I remember seeing his version of that when I was a kid, and it was very it was a great a great time. But when I rediscovered Jess Franco as a director, I was watching, like I said, I was watching. I always watch Mood's show. He's like hardcore director. I mean, collector. He was talking about Jess Franco, and I noticed that he covered, throughout the year or so that I discovered his show. He's covered a few of his movies, and I was watching a show the other day, and he was talking about how he had just acquired another Jess Franco film, and that he has up to about 80 of his films in his collection. So I was like, my mind was kind of blown, and I bought Angel of Death a few weeks ago, or actually last month, and I had never seen it, and then I looked up. So then I started doing some reading and some research about Jess Franco, and then I came across those films that I mentioned earlier that I had seen when I was a kid, and I was like, holy mackerel, I have seen some of his films. But then I realized, like, this guy was so prolific. He made, up to 80 to 100 films. I mean, just wild. It kind of reminded me a little bit of like the amount of work that Lucio Fulci, created during his whole like filmmaking career. The great legendary director that he was. And Jess Franco was a Spanish director. Um, he did a whole slew of films. This film, in particular, Angel of Death, which I have on Blu-ray, I just recently picked up a couple more of his movies. But this film, in particular, is considered like it's definitely an exploitation movie, but it's kind of considered to be a Nazi exploitation film. But Jess Franco was born in 1930. He was a filmmaker and composer. He was known mostly for, obviously, as being a real force in the world of exploitation and B movies as a director and writer and director. Um, and he also like created a ton of films in the 60s, 70s, right up into the 80s. He remained active right up until 2013, so that's wild. He and he did, everything that he did was, pretty concentrated in the world of like exploitation. But he did, crime exploitation, Nazi exploitation films, some horror films, vampire exploitation movies. So he kind of ran the gamut. He did another one of his films that he's most well known for is Marquis de Sade. Um, he also did Necronomicon, 99 Women, and Count Dracula, and The Bloody Judge. And these were all like Christopher Lee movies, and they were, kind of attributed to or part of like the Hammer kind of series, because that was during the 60s, 70s. That was like the heyday. I mean, Hammer itself still exists, but the 60s and 70s was like the heyday, like their prime time. So he was, one of the most popular actors, Christopher Lee at that time. So he also worked with Jess Franco, like I said. So, but this film, Angel of Death, I had never seen this movie, and I was sold. I kept in my travels and looking through movies. This movie always came up, and I was always looking at it, and I was like, oh, this looks really cool. But I just, for some reason, I never took the leap and bought it. I had never seen it, and I, obviously kept hearing Jess Franco's name, and now I'm like, oh wow, okay, he was a serious player in the world of exploitation. And so I bought it, and I bought it like I said last month, and it's such an awesome movie. It's a basically it's like a Nazi exploitation movie, and the whole premise of it is based on the idea of well, it's kind of based somewhat on real stories or a real part of history, but then it's also, it's an exploitation movie, so it's taken to this like extreme, and it's like kind of campy and ridiculous and over the top, and it's obviously pure fiction, but it's loosely based on Joseph Mengele, who and a group of other Nazis that had escaped Germany after the death of Hitler in World War II. And the part of the story that's actually true and pretty mind-boggling is that during during that time when the Third Reich was being crushed by all the Allied forces, a lot of uh, Hitler's inner circle, Joseph Mengele, one of them, and many other top officials in the Third Reich, had actually escaped, and they went to different areas in like Latin America where they basically went underground, and they took refuge, and they basically, a lot of them lived for, they lived a full life where they were untouched and not you know ever brought to justice for their atrocious crimes. There were obviously a few that were captured, or quite a few that were captured at a later point and that were brought to justice. There were a lot of Israeli campaigns during that time where they used their army, the secret military police, the Mossad, to kind of infiltrate where a lot of these ex-Nazis were still, or they weren't ex-Nazis, but they were located, and there was a lot of kind of cloak and dagger work that was done behind the scenes to kind of locate a lot of these war criminals. But this movie kind of plays with that idea where Joseph Mengele basically escapes to a Latin country, and basically, well, it actually kind of takes place in the U.S., but he escapes. Joseph Mengele escapes, and he basically goes underground and acquires this whole like other group of followers that agree with his completely lunatic philosophy, and he basically decides to kind of bring back the Third Reich, and to where he eventually creates this like his own private military. And the whole premise of the story is that there are these like secret agents that work within the U.S. that are out to find Joseph Mengele and bring him to justice. So the whole film and the whole premise is the idea of these guys going in and locating Joseph Mengele and his like secret army, and where his secret location is, and basically bring him down. And it's amazing. It came out in 1985, and one of the things too, like I said, I had never seen this before, but one of the things that I was sold on was this cover, which is just, the artwork is just incredible. And that's Joseph Mengele on the cover, or at least the actor who plays Joseph Mengele, and it's just awesome. That's one of the allures of a lot of these great classic exploitation films, is the artwork, that whole kind of grindhouse, pulpy aesthetic behind it, and the artwork that they used for a lot of these trailers or movie posters, and covers for, like, I remember as a kid being in, going to the video store, and you'd go to the racks and they'd have all the VHS tapes, and I'd always go to the horror section, and you would just see all these amazing covers of, you know, House by the Cemetery or The Gates of Hell, or you know, films like this, um, countless titles. But that was like as a kid, and even now, but as a kid, that was the thing that like attracted me by, you know, the amazing, incredible artwork that they had, and you know, being that it was, it's part of the world of exploitation. They were all about the whole way of how they can attract people's attention. You know, with the trailers. A lot of the times too, the trailers were to a degree because they were all about selling the movie and trying to push it. And the market was so crowded, so they were trying to make things as over the top as they could. But there were also times of where they would use scenes that were not actually in the actual film, and they would use that as the trailer. So sometimes when you'd get down to actually watching the film, it would be kind of misleading, or you'd be like, "Wait, this scene is not in this movie." But that was a thing too. But it was because it was the world of exploitation. They were doing whatever they could through marketing to really milk that audience for people who, you know, who liked these incredibly low budget, strange films. And this movie plays out like an incredible. It's just such a great action film. There's some really great characters. Again, it's got all the the great classic kind of tropes of exploitation. You know, some pretty bad acting, but the story is really great. You know, there's obviously, you know, compared to say filmmakers that are you know, legitimately skilled, I guess, to a degree. There's obviously, you know, there's some big holes in the story and things that happen, but it just adds to the charm. The music is great. It's 1985, so it's got all this great, amazing kind of 80s synth music that's going on for the score. Um, the only thing that's disappointing, I got this really cheap, but it doesn't have any special features. It does have a collection of really amazing trailers of films that came out that year, which is really pretty cool. There's no um, there's no special features other than that. But I recently picked up another collection of Jess Franco films, and it's which I just started, and it's pretty incredible. And I'll eventually do a show on those films. And but it's a whole package. There's like two of his films in the package, and then there's also a bonus disc of where it's all like interviews, and there's actually an interview with Jess Franco on it. So I'm really excited about that. But this movie is a super fun. It's a super like it's very violent. I mean, pretty much everybody dies. The ending in this film is there's something about it that's so satisfying. There's definitely these plot twists and turns that happen that I did not see coming, and I was really surprised, kind of shocked, and it kind of goes down in a way that you would not expect. And but it I really feel like, you know, it's considered a Nazi exploitation film, and it's really over the top, and you get to see, you know, these, you know, military guys that are going in to kill. They're trying to capture Joseph Mengele alive, but all this chaos ensues when they're actually trying to infiltrate his his like mansion that he has or his underground headquarters. And the action in this film is just incredible. There's all these amazing scenes in this film too, where there's one guy where these like the American force that goes in, that's like part of this. They're like a paramilitary spy group of police officers. They're trained in various forms of spy infiltration, but they also recruit these guys that are just kind of wacky and crazy. They recruit this one guy in particular who is like this black belt, this martial artist, and he's just so completely over the top. They also recruit this guy who is like this gymnast who uh, who they use to try to to help out with them actually scaling the fences and these buildings to get into the house, and it's completely hilarious and ridiculous, but amazing. But there's all these great scenes in this film of where, like I said, there's a lot of great action in this film. It's a really great action film, and it really builds. And the characters are great. I really kind of got invested in the characters. There's one girl, one character in particular who is friends with these American paramilitary um, uh, people that are going in to find Joseph Mengele. This woman who is friends with them, and she has this information. She has this relationship with somebody for a brief point who is part of Joseph Mengele's inner circle. So she ends up finding these you know these facts around about that this is actually conspiring, that there actually is this like new, you know, incarnation of the SS that is growing, and she kind of stumbles into this information, and then the Americans take her in to use her as like an informant, and it's really cool, and it's really interesting. But the action in this film is just great, and there's a few action sequences in the film, the way it's shot, that are just so cool. Where all of a sudden uh, the film will slow way down, and it will be kind of almost psychedelic. Everything will freeze frame and slow down during these certain kill sequences, and it's super cool. It's just really visually, it's just really kind of out of this world. But fantastic movie, fantastic score. So yeah, I'm looking forward to finishing up and starting this newer Jess Franco package that I just got, and I from what I've seen so far, I love it. It's a collection of some of his early films from like the late '60s, I believe, and this came out in '85, so this is quite a few years older later. But fantastic movie, such a great action movie. There's all this great gunplay, lots of great action. When you consider that this was made in '85, it's just it's great. It's very violent, it's very gory. Um, it's pretty over the top, and it's also hilarious. But it's got some great characters. The story is really cool, um, and just yeah, great. Can't say enough about this movie. So if you get a chance, dig into some Jess Franco. He's kind of becoming a new guy that I'm really interested in, and especially around the amount of films that he created during his long career. So yeah, this is Jason Dean. So Film Fanatic. So thanks again for checking out the page and supporting it. Get a chance, like it and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.